Hey everyone, Carl Thomas here, your host for the Best Boss Ever podcast series. We're back for season 4 with more amazing guests, more real life stories, and more pearls of wisdom, all with a healthy dose of humor. We all have choices to make every day, so thank you for choosing to listen. I truly hope you hear something exciting today that you can put to use right away. So welcome and stay tuned, because the hits just keep on coming. Recently retired, today's guest, Meg Liberman, spent the past 16 years as head of casting for CBS television studios. First as the senior vice president, and then elevated to executive vice president, a post she held for nearly 10 years. In her position, Meg supervised talent strategy and the casting of all CBS television studios programs for broadcast, cable, streaming, and emerging platforms, including all series and all pilots. Prior to CBS taking her, quote-unquote, off the market, Meg founded and ran her own casting company dating back to 1984. She's been nominated for 11 Emmy Awards and has 3 wins to her credit, including for the HBO miniseries From the Earth to the Moon in 1998, Band of Brothers, one of everyone's favorites, in 2002, and The Pacific in 2010. Other Emmy Award nominations include Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip in 2007, The Path to 9/11, 2006, Into the West 2005, The Comeback in 2005, and the list goes on. Additionally, she has been nominated 56 times for the coveted Artios Award by the Casting Society of America, and she's won it 11 times for The Pacific, Band of Brothers, Seinfeld, 3 times for Seinfeld, The Larry Sanders Show, Dilbert, Third Rock from the Sun, The Days and Nights of Molly Dodd, and Pushing Daisies, and she won 2 for that one. And it's not just television. On the feature side, Liberman cast one of the most successful independent films of all time, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and produced the cult favorite, Playing by Heart, starring Angelina Jolie and Sean Connery. The list does go on, and I could go on, but I think this quote from David Staff, current president of CBS Studios, upon her retirement says it all. Quote, "There is so much to say about her and the brilliant work she has done over her 40-plus year career. But I think we would all agree that Meg is much more than a casting savant. She's an incredible human being, smart, passionate, generous, and always unflappable. The epitome of grace under pressure. She cares deeply for her team, co-workers, producers, casting directors, and all those who've had the privilege to know her and be within her orbit. Meg is both bold and humble, a rare combination, especially for someone of her caliber who has assembled award-winning casts across more than 400 series and movies, with a few Emmys of her own to boot. Her creative instincts have always been second to none, and there's been more than one occasion where she could have reminded me that she was right, but she didn't. Her legacy at the studio will forever be the incredible casts across those hundreds of shows, but also the outstanding colleagues that she nurtured, including those in her phenomenal department. Meg is a reminder to us all that the greatest influence and impact someone can have is to lead with integrity and kindness." Meg, so great to have you. Welcome to the Best Boss Ever podcast series.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Listen, most of us, in fact, all of us who have had successful careers started out being cast, but not casting. Where and how did you get your start, and who was the best boss or most influential leader that you ever worked for?
Well, I was fortunate to grow up in the entertainment business where my mother was a casting director, actually, and cast a lot of incredible shows, including Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley and The Brady Bunch and The Odd Couple and Get Smart. So I was actually, and my father was a publicist, and I basically in high school was already starting to help her after school and make deals and do all that. And from that, I didn't really want to go into casting. I wanted to be a director, actually. And I started film school, but it ultimately wasn't for me. And there were 100 guys and 5 women in my class at USC. And I just learned that I was not interested in technical filmmaking. So my mother had a business partner at the time, a woman named Marcia Kleinman, who convinced me to come work for them at Paramount. And that's what I did. So I started working for that. I started working really being overseen by Marcia, who was a really brilliant casting person. She had incredible taste, unbelievably great instincts. And she was also an avid art collector, which was interesting because, I think casting is an art form, and there was a real corollary between casting and the visual arts in some way. And I was also an art history major in college before I decided to switch to filmmaking. But I learned so much from watching her and her wisdom about how she did the job. But also, I think I was just born and bred into it. My father also was represented Bob Hope. That was his biggest client, and he used to travel all across. Every Christmas, he would go on all those USO tours with him. But he also represented like Nat King Cole and Phyllis Diller, and he had a big career as a publicist. So it was just like kind of in my blood. So and my sister became a talent agent, which is how my mother started in the business, and then became a personal manager. So my sister and I joke all the time that neither one of us had a choice about what we were going to do with our lives. We just kind of went into the family business. I did have, in some ways, I guess, and I never thought about how lucky I was to have, that background. So it was growing up in LA and being just sort of surrounded by the business. That was kind of second nature for me.
Right. And, well, yeah, no, it sounds like you and your sister wouldn't have known any better, right? You were literally cast from the get-go, it sounds like.
And I think that helped me because I had so many relationships in terms of, when I started. And,
right.
and looking back on it, I see how fortunate I was.
Right. Well, those of us, generally speaking, on the outside looking in, need breaks. And yours were homegrown, literally and figuratively, right?
Absolutely.
No, that's so cool. Well, listen, casting, we all see it. We all go on IMDb and see who's our favorite films or the films we remember, but can't quite remember who the actors and actresses were. But casting, to me, and you and my daughter are good, quite close friends. She's also in the entertainment industry. And in the one aspect of film or television making, to me, that is really mysterious is the art, as you called it, of casting. Can you shed a little bit of light on that? Maybe demystify it somewhat for us?
Yeah, I can. But part of it is we want to keep it mysterious. We don't want to share what happened because basically a good idea can come from anywhere. It can come from a writer who had someone in mind when they wrote the project, to the studio or network having a very specific idea of who they think it should be, to actually just finding someone and in an audition. And so it's really kind of, I think it's why for so long it's taken, this is the first year starting in 2025 where casting directors are going to get Academy Awards. And I don't think that my mother or Marcia would have ever thought that this would ever happen. I mean, no one ever thought it would ever happen because mostly directors, didn't like the fact that we had casting director in our name. And then the other part of it is they felt that it is, sometimes people are attached to movies to get them going or television shows or whatever. So because it's more of a collective art form, they didn't understand the merit of the individual job itself. Everyone takes credit, for finding somebody. So that's been a long road, but it's very exciting that it's now coming to fruition.
Well, that's really cool. I had no idea. I'm probably closer to it just because of family ties than most, but I didn't know that there wasn't an Academy Award for a casting director until next year. That's amazing.
Yep.
Wow.
And I bet now, after this movie, The Stuntman, that's just come out, that there's going to be an Academy Award for stunt work.
That wouldn't surprise who that wouldn't surprise anybody. There should be.
Well, I think that new movie is a love poem to the stunt people. I think that's part of their publicity strategy to make that happen. We'll see.
Got it.
So I was also not a person. I'm not a person who's a fake it till you make it kind of a person. And I decided while I was casting the show Fame, that I decided that I was going to study acting, because even though I grew up in the business, I knew nothing about acting or how to get an actor to create a real performance. What are the steps that they take to make something like that happen? So I did a 2-year acting program as a casting director, which was, I think, shocking to some of the people in the class. But, they'd see me and they go, what are you doing here? But that also really helped hone my directing ability, which helped so much in sort of carving out performances for actors when they would come in an audition. And that, for me, was the most fun part of the job, was actually being in the room and reading with actors, which is not what I did as an executive.
Got it. So that's fascinating to me, but it makes perfect sense. To spend 2 years in the craft that you are searching for as a casting director, it would seem like kind of logical, but also a requirement. Would it not?
Well, I think a lot of people that get into the business, either on the agency side or the casting side, are failed actors. My mother, my father, and my sister both all wanted to act. I never did. But I just felt if I really wanted to contribute, I could look at someone and say they were good or bad, but I couldn't explain why or how to help make them better. So this gave me sort of a language to talk to actors, which has been incredibly beneficial, as I pursued my career.
Which would be why director is in your title, because you're somewhere between the casting director and the director. If you're able to coach, extract, encourage, and get optimized performance during an audition, right?
Correct. 100%.
Well, that's cool. So obviously, you know a lot of actors, you know a lot of directors, and the longer you spent in the industry, I'm guessing that, well, we know this to be true, the more friendships you made, right? So when actors are either being auditioned by you, or you are flagging them as, one of the top 2 or 3 people that should be considered for this role, is there a healthy tension between friendship and professionalism?
Yes, always. Yes. Yeah, it's funny. And my husband later in life has now become a bit of an actor. So he's actually doing improv and auditioning for things. It's interesting. But generally, I've always tried to keep it pretty professional. There are a billion actors. I mean, actually, I think when I first started casting, there were probably 25,000 actors in the Screen Actors Guild. And there was one book, the Players Directory, the Academy Players Directory, where they would have pictures of the actors, and you would just go through and look at them and know who, and find out who their agents were, because obviously there were no computers. But I pretty much had that book memorized, and then over time, people would come in, because it was a totally, it's not online the way it is now. And, you develop relationships and you learn. When the more times people would come in and audition, you'd work with them and you'd be able to get them to adjust their performances. You know them better than you did, than just watching something and not having a relationship with them. So yes, you did, I think, develop much stronger, not necessarily close relationships, but relationships of admiration and, recognition, to say, casting director would know the actor would know the casting person. So you'd have some sense of who they were, as opposed to just looking at a piece of film, which is a lot of what goes on now, because especially during the pandemic, there were no auditions.
Right.
So,
well, okay, that leads me to another logical question, which is, over the course of 400 series, film, shows, etc. How is there a number of actors or actresses that you have cast more times than another? I guess what I'm asking is, if you were to say, okay, Carl, here are the top 10 actors that I've cast in rank order in terms of number of shows or opportunities. Is that a list you have?
No.
You don't?
No, because everything is based on, are they available? Will they work for the money? Do they want to do the project? So there were, when I was especially working at CBS, the network would have sort of their faves, their sort of go-to people that they would hire sometimes more than once. As an individual casting person, I could look at some of my old stuff and say, oh, yeah, there's so-and-so who they're just, you kind of have your own players, but it doesn't mean that, part of what you're doing as a casting person is you're trying to get into the head of the producer or the writer that's written the project. And you're sort of mind melding with them about what they, how they see things. So yes, I would say that there are people that we would go to on a regular basis because of familiarity, but that didn't mean that they would get approved. But most of the time, before there was as much of a bureaucracy as there is today, because everything is done kind of more by committee now.
Right.
So you cast, when my mother was casting, she'd make a list of like 5 actors and the producer would say, who do you want? And they'd just make a decision. And she'd be home by 5 o'clock. And then my parents would go to 3 parties a night or it was some premiere or something. But it's not, now there's just so much content and so much stuff to watch and so many cooks in the kitchen in terms of how things get done that it's a much bigger, more complicated, wider world of choice. And also a lot of other people make the decision with you.
Right.
So you're suggesting, the casting person suggesting, and then the producers have to say yes, and then goes to the studio, who are the liaison between the producers and the network, which I think is the best thing. It's of all the possible jobs, I think the studio job was, I think, the most fun and creative, and the network ultimately makes the final decision. So there's a lot of negotiating that goes on between who's going to get what role, and these are only for the not for the little parts. Although at CBS, when I was there, they approved every single part, even down to the one parts. It was a lot of roles.
So as the recommendations go up the food chain, so to speak, I get the decision by committee. Is there a notion that the process is looking for 100% consensus by whatever seats at the table are occupied? Or is there a tiebreaker? I mean, is there an exec or an individual who has the final call?
Yeah, the final call is probably the president of the network at the end of the day. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, especially when, it's offers and you don't, they make an offer and sometimes it does not work. And I've had that happen as well. And, then you have to totally scramble and regroup. It's happened a number of times. But the interesting thing is there doesn't seem to be a blame put on anybody because everyone's sort of held hands to make these decisions. If someone strongly disagrees, it's hard to get 6 people or 6 entities to agree,
right.
And also the other thing is, as time has gone on and television has become much more expensive, there's multiple studios involved. So it's just a lot. It's become way more bureaucratic than it used to be, clearly.
Right. I mean, it is what it is, good or bad. I mean, listen, great content still gets made with great actors.
Absolutely.
And that's the fun part. So, back to your roots, you sort of grew up, it was in your DNA. By the time you were actually looking at making a decision on where to go, you already had, you know, the Meg Liberman network was already alive and well, and you didn't have to sort of crack the code. But what about, you know, the stories we all grew up with, the kid from Nebraska or the girl from Kentucky or whatever goes to New York or LA and literally tries to break into the business. And let's assume for the moment that he or she's gone through acting schools, that, you know, there's obviously a glow and an opportunity here. There's talent. How does new talent get in front of Meg Liberman?
Through seeing them in a play, through seeing them right now, they used to call them, I think they're still calling them the league auditions, where Yale and Carnegie Mellon and Juilliard and all these different schools do their showcases, and they all come out here and do, you know, they go to New York, they're in New York, and then they come out here. But most of the time, if you don't have representation of some kind, it's really hard to get to be seen, especially now with so many actors. And, you know, so that's the way actors are submitted, basically through talent agents. So it's really tough if you can't get an agent or a manager, which is, you know, there's so many managers now too. So it's a lot.
Right. There's lots of layers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's got to be incredibly frustrating for kids. I use the term loosely, right? You know, because one would hope that merit and talent and perseverance and grit can carry the day more often than not. But unless, to your point, there's representation, the likelihood of that individual, even with all those attributes, getting in front of you or getting an opportunity is not that great.
It's very, very it's really challenging. And I honestly don't recommend this acting as a career for people unless they have that, they're so driven, you know, they're so driven to do it. But I do feel if they are driven and they have talent, if they really have the gift, then they will be seen. Right. They will be discovered. I have one story about when I was casting Fame. We did an open call when I was at MGM, which is now Sony, and we had 5,000 people show up for this open call, which was crazy. And I was literally out there with a bullhorn trying, you know, we had like all these people, security, all these people sort of helping us manage all the people that were coming in. And we'd see a big group of people, and we knew kind of what we were looking for. And basically we would type them out if they were too old or they weren't, you know, they just didn't feel like they would be in high school in some kind of way. So anyway, we were doing this. And I remember the first 3 people that came in they had cards that they were supposed to fill out, their name, address, all that stuff. And the first 3 people we wanted to have all 3 of them back in, and they did not fill their cards out correctly. And I went, this was so long ago that I actually went on the radio and we put on like an APB. We had their names, put out like an APB for these people to call us and come in. And 2 of them, one of them was Don Cheadle.
Whoa.
When he was going to Cal Arts. The other was another kid named Jesse Borrego, who actually wound up getting the series regular role. Don did not. And then a third kid named David Dunsing. And it was just like incredible that we were able to find them and that they wound up having the opportunity to really, have a career. It was incredible.
Oh man, that is an awesome story. And just personal note here, love Don Cheadle. He's brilliant in everything he ever did, from Hotel Rwanda to The Family Man. He's just so good. All right, so you've obviously cast some huge hits, won Emmy Award. can you nail the best, most interesting, most gratifying project you ever worked on, and why?
It's so easy. It's Band of Brothers.
Okay, give us more.
Well, first of all, it was my second project working with Tom Hanks and Tony Toe. I did From the Earth to the Moon, which was fantastic, which was about the Apollo space program for HBO before that, which I loved. And they are always so much fun to work with. And I love history, and to have the opportunity to honor these people. My father was in World War II, and, to actually to be a part of this. The most amazing thing about it is what they were writing the scripts at the time. And I had no material. I had one scene that I read actors for months. I must have done this. I think I worked on it for a year and a half before they started shooting. And what I did have was they were doing a companion documentary about the real guys from Easy Company, from the 101st Airborne. And so they were present day videos of the ones that were still alive. So I had those videos, and then obviously it was based on a book. And then the other thing that they gave me, they had a big library of research, a lot of heavy research was going on. And so I was able to get bios and photos of them when they were young. But because I didn't have individual material, all I could do was read actors to figure out if they felt like they could live in World War II. They could be too contemporary. They obviously were Caucasian in this group. And they had, when I wound up going to the UK to look for actors there, because we decided we were going to need to shoot there, basically because of the tanks and all the military stuff was all there. It wasn't that we never were going to shoot it here. I had to make sure that these British actors could do American accents. So that was a big part of it. And that's one of the things that I would do is, even afterwards, when I would go to the UK and meet actors, because I love British actors, I tell their agents, I'm going to ask them to do an American accent for me. And some of them would be panicked about it, because I wouldn't give them the material. I'd say, here, read this magazine,
right.
Just so I could hear what they could do and how and what possibly they needed work on. But because so many of these people were so familiar with American television, and, a lot of, it wasn't, most young actors can do American accents. So even though we had dialect coaches. So that's what I did. I read everybody under the sun. And because within this age group, and because we didn't have, material, we wound up more scripts. We wound up getting about 50 guys together, and we had a callback with Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. And
not intimidating in any way.
Well, what was even more incredible was that Tom was on a break from doing Castaway. He was losing weight for while he was shooting, they had to take a break so he could lose weight. And he had this crazy beard, and actors would come in and read, and they'd read with Tom, and they would all be freaking out that they got to read with him. Right. And he was so really wonderful. So that was a big part of it. But the callback session was amazing, because we were able to mix and match these guys and try to figure out who was who. And it was just, it was amazing. There was one actor that Stephen and Tom both wanted for one of the parts. And when I called the agent to say that's who they, that he was on a very short list, there was one person that said he didn't want to do it. And I was pretty upset.
Wow.
I was pretty upset. But you know what? It was a huge commitment, because these people had to, there was one actor named Scott Grimes that I worked with on Party of Five. And he is, we were on the set one day in London, he literally was running through a field with a gun. Explosions were going off. I didn't know how. I mean, all the stuff that they had to do to do this work, and they had to go to boot camp for 2 weeks, which was pretty crazy. And it was just a huge commitment, and live in the UK for 10 months, which sounds great, but we moved all their families over if they were married and had kids, and it was just, not everybody wants to do that kind of work.
Right.
But we got all the right actors, and the most amazing thing about it was when, they all got to meet the guys, if they were still alive, of who they played.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh my God, it was so incredible. They got so close. These men were so amazing. And then we had a premiere in Normandy on D-Day, and we all got to go. And even the soldiers got to go. The World War II guys got to go. And I think there were 40 of them that flew over, and we got, it was just insane and so moving. And to see the actors and the guys that they played together was just, amazing.
That's amazing. And obviously the quality of the content, Meg, speaks for itself, including the Emmy Award that's sitting somewhere behind you or off on the side somewhere. I mean, that is a great story. And, I watched the, most recent collaboration of those two guys in Masters of the Air, and they did a very similar thing, because they did the 10-part series and then the documentary with those that were still alive, and they tracked those guys. I mean, that was amazing. And obviously not that many of them were alive anymore, but they had historical footage of them, and I just think that the whole thing, from Band of Brothers to everything we've seen since then has been extraordinary. And congratulations to you, because that is no small feat. And obviously the proof is in the pudding, as they say, for all of the accolades and awards that came afterward. Listen, we've got a few minutes left. Always end the pod with 3 questions. The first one is your favorite mistake where you botched it pretty good and recovered and learned and carried those learnings with you for the rest of your career.
When I was young and starting out, I got offered a show, a half-hour comedy, that I decided to take. But I had known that I knew they were letting go of the casting director, but I didn't know if she knew what was happening. And it was for me a big mistake, because I should have asked her, why was she leaving the show? Because it turned out to be like a disaster. Taking over that show, there was a reason why she wasn't staying on the show, and I didn't get that information. And I knew her, and we were friends, and I somehow wasn't smart enough or seasoned enough to have any sense of of how to handle that situation. So I always really, after that, tried to do my homework to make sure that if I heard someone was difficult, I would try to suss that out or know at least what I was getting into. Because my kind of motto was, when I was casting, and, I was fortunate to have obviously so much repeat business over the years, which was wonderful. So I wasn't always available for things, but I liked to work with people on projects that I liked, with people who were nice. And that wasn't always the case. That's sort of a naive way to operate, but that's kind of was my goal.
Well, I think everybody who hears this podcast would say exactly the same thing. I want to work on projects I like and with people who are nice. I mean, that's awesome. And you're right. We don't always get that perfect storm. But that's a great one. Do your homework, ask the questions, do your research, know what you're walking into when you open the door. That's a good one.
Because I was protecting her for some reason, and to my own detriment.
Got it. Good one. Next question. Huge female musical artist I am. So your favorite live concert that featured a female artist or a female-led band?
I would have to say Joni Mitchell. I was fortunate to be invited, I think when I was doing the movie Playing by Heart, Larry Klein, who was her bass player, was somehow involved in the music of the show, of the movie. And she had a concert at Warner Brothers, and they did it in the round, and they filmed it. And it was just her. But the most amazing thing about it was there was no band, it was just her. And they did it, they built a set, and they had all her paintings surrounding her in the and I love her so much, and just to get to see her art, I mean, all together like an art gallery in the round was really, really extraordinary. And I think it was like in 1999 or something that this happened, but it was really a special evening, and not a lot of people in the audience. It was like a small, intimate thing, and I don't remember why they did it, but I was glad I could be a part of it.
Wow, that is awesome, because she spans, I'm not even going to try to guess, but just very recently, she released a track, and I don't know that she won the Grammy. She might have, but I know she was nominated, right?
Yeah, I think she was honored. I mean, her whole physical comeback has been incredible.
Exactly, and her body of work, going back to I'll date myself, 60s and 70s, Miles of Isle, still an album track that is, a gold standard or a platinum standard, whichever you choose. So great call on Joni. Last question, the pithy one. Words matter. We all know that, especially in a leadership role. Oftentimes it's what you don't say as important as what you do say. So your favorite word and why?
I would have to say instinct, because I think casting, you have to go with your gut and know that whomever you are pushing or whoever you have figured out should be the choice for a part, or someone that you have watched their work over time and have a role that you think they're perfect for, somehow you just know that in your bones. I could feel it, and I could feel it in many of the shows that I've done. And I would say that was a big part of why I think Band worked out so well. You sort of had it was like a mind meld that you have with the creators when you're working, and it informs how these shows get cast. So it's kind of, there's a little bit of magic to it in a way.
I like that. I like that a lot. Obviously, your instincts were honed over time with experience and wisdom. But I will say, with the body of work that is on your CV and your history, that your instincts serve you incredibly well, Meg Liberman.
Thank you.
I can't thank you enough for being a part of the Best Boss Ever podcast series. Thanks again, Meg. Good luck to you now.
Thanks so much.
We really appreciate you taking the time to listen today. Thank you. Please subscribe and rate us on Apple Podcasts. You can also find the Best Boss Ever on Spotify, Google, Pandora, Stitcher, and many other podcast platforms. Hey, how about some feedback? Email me at carl@thebestbossever.com. Or better yet, connect with me on LinkedIn at Carl A. Thomas. Lastly, I want to give a huge shout out to Peter Duff, my sound engineer. He just makes us sound better. Thanks again for listening, and remember, words matter.